Welcome to my series about ON1 Photo Raw 2019. Today we are going to deal with dynamic contrast. Let's just start by putting on dynamic contrast on this picture. Hopefully you have downloaded this picture and have been following from episode 1 to this episode, so you have something to practice on. Anyway, let's just jump in and add the filter. So go and click on effects first, then add filter, then dynamic contrast. As you can see, dynamic contrast is a really powerful filter. It changes your image a lot, and it's kind of a make or break filter if you use the default settings. So today we are not going to use the default settings. We are going to try and adjust it to where we like it with the sliders, and we are going to use two dynamic contrast filters, one for the waterfall and one for everything around the waterfall. So let's just start with the waterfall. To make the mask on the waterfall, we are not going to paint it out with the masking brush. We are actually going down to the color enhancer and we're gonna copy that mask. So make sure you click on the show hide mask and click on the copy button. Then after it's rendered, you go into the dynamic contrast filter, you click on the masking button, and then you click on paste. Now, as you can see, the waterfall is actually black on the mask, and black conceals while white reveals. So we need to invert the mask because this is for the waterfall. So just click on the invert button, and now the dynamic contrast is applied only on the waterfall. So now it's time to decide if we like it like default or if we are actually going to change something. And I'm actually going to paint just a little bit out of this dynamic contrast. I don't want dynamic contrast around here. I kind of want a creamy white feeling exactly around the water flow. But at the same time, over here there's eyes. I don't want to mask out the eyes. I want the eyes to be contrasty and detailed. So we are going over to the panel on the left side and click on masking brush. Then you click on masking brush on the top. Make sure that the mode is set to paint out and the feather is at 100 and the opacity is at 100. Then you just go in and paint out what you don't want the mask to be applied on. So just a few strokes. You don't need to worry about the edges and stuff like that because we have such a high feather, so it's going to feather out on the side. So just don't worry about that. Just do the brushing. And we're gonna brush a little bit up here. So now the dynamic contrast should be around the waterfall and the black rocks or rock face behind the waterfall, and it should be applied to the rocks in the water. And if you want to paint the mask in somewhere, you can just hold down the option key on Mac or alt key on the Windows, and you can paint the dynamic contrast in just by doing that. So I'm just gonna enhance the rock face or whatever you want to call it on the right and the left side of the waterfall. Just going to make sure that we have a lot of detail in the rich textures that is around the waterfall. And of course you can make the brush bigger if you want. And if it bleeds into the waterfall, it doesn't really matter because of the feather. And I want to make sure that all of the rocks here has the dynamic contrast it should have, so that shouldn't be any problem. And I want to make sure there are some dynamic contrast on the side here because it's a leading line and it's the line with the least disturbing brushes around, because on this side it's really disturbing. It's too much. It should be a lot softer. So I don't want to draw the eyes of the viewer to this side. I want the details to be on this side, on the right side. We tend to look from left to right, so it would have been perfect if we put the details on the left side, but yeah, it is what it is. So this contrast filter is starting to be finished now. I'm just gonna paint in the dynamic contrast on some more rocks here. Even some more on the right side. And as I said, if the effect bleeds out, it doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it. Okay, so that's this dynamic contrast. We are done with that contrast. Then we are going down to the color enhancer and we're going to copy that mask again. So just click on show hide masking options button, go in and click on copy. Then we're going to add a filter, which is the second dynamic contrast we are going to use. So add filter, go to dynamic contrast. So on this, it's of course applied to the entire image, and as I said, we want to paste in the masking from the color enhancer, so we're just gonna go in on the show hide masking options and we're gonna click on paste. So now after it's rendering in the background, we're gonna see that we remove the dynamic contrast from the water and it's applied on everything around the water instead. What I want to do now is to paint out dynamic contrast from the places I don't want it to be visible. So I'm going to start in the brushes around the waterfall on the left side. I don't want to sharpen that anymore because it's too sharp, it's too noisy. I want it to be soft. This image is going to be ruined if you don't do something about the brushes on the left side. We don't want the eyes to go there. We're gonna make the eyes go from here and up to the top. So I'm just painting out. As you can see, I'm not painting out the greens over here because I like that, and it's sort of a leading line, but it's not noisy like the brushes down here. Now maybe we should drop down the opacity a little so it's not applied 100%, or we can drop down the opacity inside the filter itself. So we have a few options for dealing with that. And we're just gonna paint out. And again, it doesn't matter if it bleeds out into the water. Doesn't matter at all. And I think it's a bit too much up here. Yeah, that's a lot better. Sweet. And it's also a bit too much on the right side now. So we're going to paint out just the effect on the right side. Okay, sweet. So now we have blocked out the effects from the waterfall. A lot of the left side is blocked out. Then we need to make sure that we have blocked out everything we want on the right side, which is basically the trees here without leaves. Those birch trees, they are just noisy as well. So I kind of like the details on this tree, so I'm gonna let that be. I'm not gonna mask it out, but I'm gonna mask out all the way over here because I just don't want the dynamic contrast effect to be in the shadow area over here. There's no point to have a dynamic contrast there. And then I'm going to go up and drop the opacity out to maybe around 40 and paint it out over here because I do want some dynamic contrast in these trees. These are kind of a part of the reward from following up the right line here, so some contrast there would be nice. Okay, then I need to check the sky. Do I want the sky to be really soft, or do the dynamic contrast actually do anything for the sky at all? So let's just check that. So we're gonna check the before and after. Yeah, there's that difference is really small, but I'm gonna paint it out anyway. I don't want any more details in the sky than it is already. I want it to be soft, and I'm actually going to soften the sky even more with the glow effects. So yeah, let's go over this. I think this is actually pretty decent. I like it a lot. Okay, so that's 2 dynamic contrasts done really quickly. But yeah, I've almost forgot. We are actually going to drop another dynamic contrast just so you can see that you can adjust the dynamic contrast with the sliders. So I'm just gonna add this one, and we're gonna do stuff with the sliders and then just remove it. So as you can see now, the image is truly really grungy. So if I had sharpened the image a ton before dropping the dynamic contrast on the image, I would need to tone down the dynamic contrast a lot. So you have a few options there. You have the opacity that's on every filter inside of ON1. So let's drop down the opacity and see the changes. So that's a lot softer than what it was. So as you can see, you can do a lot with the opacity. Whenever you're working with the opacity on a filter, I would recommend that you go all the way down and then go up and up. So you do it in small increments. Don't go all the way up and go down, because more often than not, it's too much when you go down on a filter, because you're gonna be happy, oh, this looks nice, but your eyes are getting fooled because it's so much nicer than full. So you're gonna think that, oh, this is actually perfect. No, start from 0 and go up. Do that with almost any kind of sliders inside of any Photo Raw processing engine, especially with saturation, vibrance, sharpening. Yeah, basically a ton of the filters inside of ON1. Go from all the way down and in small increments up and up and up and up. Okay, so let's put it on 100 again, just to see what we can do with the sliders down here. So you have the dynamic contrast for the smaller details, so that's the needles in these 3, the brush and the textures. So small kind of textures you can adjust with this one. So let's just drop that all the way down. Okay, so let's drop down to medium. That's actually pretty nice. So we actually went down to the negative of the medium. So you can see that you can soften things as well with dynamic contrast. And you can do the same with the large details. So then you create a really soft image in the end here. You can achieve the same by going on the presets up here. So let's go to Surreal, which is gonna make a really grungy kind of HDR effect. You see, that's so terrible. It's just crazy, awful, blah. And you can click on the natural, which is the default, and you can go to the soft. So soft isn't really that soft. So for our image, we are still sharpening a lot by using this dynamic contrast filter. So if you want to go for a truly soft one, you can go down on the mediums like you saw, and then it's gonna create a softer effect, especially if you drop down everything into the negatives. So let's do medium again. And now we have actually a pretty nice softening effect. So let's go more down, and we can actually go down on the large as well. Now I'm starting to get the effect on the water I want. It's a bit too much, but if I wanted to, I could paint in this dynamic contrast just on the water, and we would have really soft, creamy, milky white water, which is the kind of water I like for waterfalls. But it's kind of too much. But if we did, we could drop down the opacity. So just focus on the water right now, and let's drop the opacity down to like 45, and then you see it's starting to look better. So let's start from 0. So now there's no effect from this dynamic contrast. It takes a while since I'm recording as well, so let's go up on the opacity. Let's try and create that softness. Yeah, that's a bit better. Let's go up even more. Yeah, this is kind of something close to what I want to achieve with this edit, and I kind of like the effect over here as well. And actually this, it's a bit too contrasted down here still, so I could just paint the waterfall and lower the opacity even more on the brush and paint on the trees, and I would have a really nice result just by using dynamic contrast. So again, dynamic contrast is a truly really powerful filter which you need to be careful with, because it's so easy to go overboard with this filter. Anyway, let's remove that filter again. So we did change a lot now. It's starting to look almost finished, this image now, but we are going to do a glow filter on it. Maybe we are actually going to do a couple of glow filters on this image, and it's going to change a lot, and it's going to be a lot softer. The glow filter inside ON1 is kind of like the Orton effect that's so popular on Instagram and stuff like that. So that's for the next episode. This was dynamic contrast. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click on like, and if you want to see more videos, please click on subscribe. And finally, if you want to buy ON1, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description. This gives you 10% off on your purchase, so it's actually pretty nice, and it helps me with a little extra. Anyway, thanks a lot, and I hope I see you again. Bye.